Neural loop, the missing link. How prediction error quietly destroys focus. She sat at her desk again. Coffee cold. Screen glowing. Same tasks. Same noise in her head. But this time, something broke. Not her focus, but her belief that she ever had it. Most of us think distraction is the enemy. We buy apps, build routines, promise ourselves this time will be different. But what if the problem isn't motivation? It's something deeper, something your brain is doing without permission. Her story started where yours might. Stuck in a cycle she couldn't name. For years, she tried everything. Meditation, apps, Pomodoro timers, decluttered desks, motivational playlists. Each one worked, for a week, maybe two. Then the fog returned, thicker than before. Maybe I'm just not built for this, she thought, scrolling through her unfinished projects like old wounds. But buried beneath her frustration was a question she hadn't asked yet. What if focus isn't something you lose, but something your brain stops trusting? That's when she stumbled across a phrase in a research paper. Prediction error. At first, it sounded technical, cold, but the more she read, the more it explained everything. The restlessness, the half-finished work, the feeling that her mind was always one step ahead, never present. Prediction error is how your brain measures surprise. Every second, your mind is running quiet calculations. What happens next? What should I expect? When reality matches prediction, you stay calm, focused, grounded. But when the mismatch is constant, when your brain keeps guessing wrong, something breaks. She thought back to her mornings. Open the laptop. Check messages. Start a task, get interrupted. Switch tabs, forget what she was doing. Start again. Her brain wasn't lazy. It was overloaded with error signals, tiny shocks of confusion, every few minutes, teaching it that focus was unreliable. Wait, she whispered to herself. I trained my brain to expect chaos. And suddenly, everything made sense. Here's what most people don't realize. Your brain doesn't just respond to distractions. It predicts them. And if distractions happen often enough, your mind starts preparing for interruption before it even arrives. Researchers at MIT found that when prediction errors pile up, when your environment becomes unpredictable, the brain shifts into a defensive mode. It stops committing to deep focus because focus has become too costly, too risky. You're not weak. You're adapted to instability. She decided to test something. For 1 week, she wouldn't fight distraction. She'd eliminate unpredictability instead. No phone on the desk. No random notifications. No switching tasks mid-thought. She even set a timer for breaks, so her brain could predict rest instead of fearing it. The first day felt strange, quiet and almost uncomfortable. Her mind kept reaching for something like a phantom limb. She laughed, realizing how deeply she'd wired herself for interruption. But by day 3, something shifted. She noticed she could hold a thought longer. Finish a paragraph without rereading it. Sit through discomfort without needing to check her phone. It wasn't willpower. It was prediction. Her brain was learning the new pattern. Focus works here. This is what people mean by flow, she thought, almost crying. I forgot what it felt like. What surprised her most wasn't just how much smoother her days became, but how different everything started to feel once she stopped training her brain for chaos. She wasn't expecting such a clear change, and honestly, she tested it more than a few times before she figured out what really worked. This isn't a promotion, just sharing real results that made a noticeable difference. A minimalist task journal helped her track patterns, and a simple analog timer eliminated the urge to check screens during deep work sessions. I'll leave suggestions in the description if you want to explore what I mean. But let's go deeper. Because prediction error doesn't just kill focus, it reshapes how you see yourself. Every time your brain fails to predict correctly, it updates its model of the world. And if the updates keep saying you can't finish things, you can't stay present, you can't trust yourself, well, eventually, you believe it. She realized she'd been living inside that belief for years. And the scariest part, she didn't even know it was a belief. It felt like truth. Neuroscientists call this learned helplessness in the attention system. Your brain isn't sabotaging you on purpose. It's trying to protect you from the pain of repeated failure. So it stops trying. You stop trying, and suddenly, distraction isn't the problem anymore, it's the solution. A way to avoid the discomfort of not being able to focus. God, she whispered, I've been running from myself. She thought about the people around her. Friends who called themselves scatterbrained, colleagues who joked about their ADHD, partners who apologized for zoning out. How many of them weren't broken, just trapped in prediction loops they didn't create? How many of us are living in environments designed to fracture attention, then blaming ourselves for the fracture? But here's where hope enters. Because if your brain learned to expect chaos, it can learn to expect clarity. Prediction error works both ways. When your environment becomes stable, when focus is rewarded instead of punished, your brain begins to trust again. It's not about discipline, it's about designing predictability into your life. She started small. Same morning routine, same workspace, same start time. Not rigid, just consistent enough that her brain could build a map. And slowly, the noise quieted. Sometimes, we only understand focus when we've lost it completely. She looked back at her old self, the one scrolling endlessly, refreshing feeds, checking notifications like a nervous tick, and felt compassion instead of shame. I wasn't weak, she realized. I was just living in a world that trained me to fragment. And now, she was learning a new language, the language of presence. There's a concept in neuroscience called error minimization. The brain's goal isn't to avoid surprises forever, it's to reduce unnecessary surprise, to build models of the world that work. When your environment is chaotic, your brain can't build those models, so it stays in survival mode, reactive, defensive, scattered. But when you create stability, even just pockets of it, your brain exhales. It stops scanning for threats. It stops bracing for interruption. It starts building again. She began noticing things she'd missed before. The way sunlight moved across her desk. The sound of her own breathing. The quiet satisfaction of finishing a single task. Fully, this is what I've been chasing, she thought. Not perfection, just this. And for the first time in years, she felt like herself. Now, let's talk about what this means for you. If you've ever felt like focus was slipping through your fingers, if you've blamed yourself, called yourself lazy, wondered why everyone else seems to have it together, listen closely. You are not the problem. The pattern is. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do, adapt. And if it adapted to chaos, it can adapt to calm. But you have to stop treating focus like a character flaw and start treating it like an environmental design problem. She made a list, not of what she needed to fix about herself, but of what she needed to fix about her environment. Notifications off, door closed. One task at a time, predictable breaks. No multitasking disguised as efficiency. It felt almost too simple, like she was missing something. But simplicity was the point. Because here's the truth, most productivity advice won't tell you. Your brain craves boredom, not stimulation, not novelty, not the endless dopamine drip of notifications and updates. Boredom, stillness, the kind of quiet that lets your mind settle into itself. When you remove unpredictability, when you stop feeding your brain error signals, something remarkable happens. You remember what it feels like to think. She started to see her old habits differently. Scrolling wasn't relaxation, it was avoidance. Multitasking wasn't productivity, it was fear of stillness. And focus. Focus wasn't a skill she lacked. It was a trust she'd lost. Sometimes, progress doesn't look like progress. It looks like sitting with discomfort, finishing one thing instead of starting 10, letting your mind wander without reaching for your phone. She laughed, realizing she'd been chasing the wrong goal all along. She didn't need to be more productive. She needed to be more present. And presence, it turned out, required one thing above all, safety. Her brain needed to know that focus wouldn't be punished, that depth wouldn't be interrupted, that stillness was allowed. Researchers at Stanford found something similar. When routine meets meaning, consistency finally sticks. But meaning doesn't come from motivation posters or self-help books. It comes from living in alignment with how your brain actually works. Prediction, pattern, stability, trust, these aren't luxuries, they're necessities. She thought about the version of herself from 6 months ago, the one who thought she was broken, the one who apologized for zoning out, for forgetting, for not being enough. If she could talk to that version now, she'd say this: you're not broken. You're just living in a system that breaks focus by design. And you can build a different system. One where presence is possible again. When she looked in the mirror again, it wasn't her reflection that had changed, it was what she believed about herself. She wasn't scatterbrained, she wasn't lazy, she wasn't failing at something others had mastered. She was human, adaptive, worthy of stillness, and she was learning slowly, imperfectly, how to come home to herself. Disclaimer: this content is for educational purposes only, and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider regarding any mental or physical health concerns. Tell us which part of this story resonated most, and where you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.